I knew my relationship was slowly wearing me down the night I stared at my phone for 3 hours waiting for a simple goodnight message that never came. That sounds dramatic now. Maybe it is dramatic. A 40-year-old man sitting alone in his apartment, refreshing a chat window like a teenager. But loneliness inside a relationship can make intelligent people behave in embarrassing ways. I think that is one of the hardest things for me to admit. Because from the outside, our relationship looked mature, stable, healthy, even. We didn't scream at each other. We didn't cheat. We didn't play cruel games. We traveled when we could. We laughed a lot in person. She held my hand in restaurants without thinking about it. She introduced me to her friends early on. Her sister once hugged me goodbye and whispered, "You're good for her." I carried that sentence around for months like proof that I was safe. But distance changes the meaning of silence, especially when one person needs connection to feel loved and the other person experiences connection as pressure. At first I thought the difference between us was small. I told myself couples survive bigger things all the time. Money problems, children, illness, betrayal. Compared to that, different texting habits sounded almost childish. I wish it had stayed that simple. We lived in different cities, about a 4-hour train ride apart. We saw each other twice a month, sometimes more if work allowed it. Those days together felt strangely easy. That was the confusing part. In person, I rarely doubted her feelings. She would rest her head against my shoulder while we cooked. She remembered tiny details about me. Once, months after I casually mentioned a book I loved as a teenager, she found an old copy online and wrapped it for my birthday. No big speech, just quiet thoughtfulness. I loved her deeply for those things. But the moment we separated again, something inside me started unraveling. I would text her when I woke up. "Hope you slept okay." Sometimes she answered at noon, sometimes at night, sometimes not at all. At first I tried to be understanding. She worked long hours as an architect and became intensely focused when stressed. She told me early in the relationship that she disappeared into herself sometimes. "I go quiet when life feels loud," she once said. I remember thinking that sounded poetic. Later, it stopped sounding poetic. Later, it felt like abandonment. And then I hated myself for even using that word, because abandonment is supposed to be something serious. Parents leaving children, people walking out forever, not a woman taking 6 hours to answer a message. Part of me constantly minimized my own feelings. Another part quietly kept score. That second part became uglier over time. I started noticing things I would have ignored before. The way she responded to my long, thoughtful messages with heart emojis. The way she could spend an entire evening posting vacation photos with friends while not replying to me once. The way she said "I miss you" only after several glasses of wine, as if affection had to accidentally escape her instead of being offered freely. I told myself I was being needy. Then I told myself she was emotionally unavailable. Then I blamed the distance. Then I blamed myself again. The exhausting thing about emotional insecurity is how quickly it changes shape. One night I finally asked her if my messages overwhelmed her. She took a long time answering. That pause alone made my stomach hurt. Then she said, "Sometimes it feels like you need constant reassurance from me." I still remember sitting very still after reading that. Not angry at first, just ashamed, because she wasn't entirely wrong. I did need reassurance. Not constantly, maybe, but often enough that I could no longer pretend otherwise. I wanted to feel chosen every day. I wanted signs, little emotional touches, proof that I existed in her mind even when we were apart. Meanwhile, she seemed perfectly capable of loving someone quietly, privately, without needing constant contact. That confused me so much that sometimes I almost resented her for it. I hated how jealous I felt of her independence. There she was, functioning normally, focusing on work, reading books, seeing friends, existing peacefully. And there I was checking timestamps like a man slowly losing dignity. I became someone I didn't entirely recognize. One afternoon she went hiking with friends and didn't answer me for almost the whole day. By evening I was furious. Not explosive furious. Worse. Cold furious. The kind where you rehearse wounded speeches while pretending you are completely reasonable. When she finally texted me a photo of a lake with beautiful here, I almost ignored it on purpose. I wanted her to feel the same panic I felt. That realization disturbed me. Sometimes I wanted to hurt her emotionally just enough for her to finally understand what distance felt like from my side. I never did it directly, but the thought existed, and I'm not proud of it. The truth is, I was lonely long before I admitted it. Not lonely because she was cruel, lonely because love was arriving in a language I could not naturally hear. And yet I kept demanding translations from her. There was one weekend that changed something between us permanently, though neither of us admitted it at the time. She came to visit me in November. Rainy, gray, one of those weekends where daylight disappears by 4 in the afternoon. I had imagined we would reconnect because the previous month had been tense. Instead, everything felt slightly off. Not terrible, just strained around the edges. She seemed tired. I seemed overly attentive in that desperate way people become when they sense emotional distance. I cooked too much food, asked too many questions, watched her face constantly for signs of warmth. I could feel myself performing closeness instead of experiencing it naturally. At one point she fell asleep on the couch while we watched television, and instead of finding it sweet, I felt rejected. That sounds horrible to admit. A sleeping woman is not an act of betrayal, but emotionally unhealthy people can turn neutral moments into evidence. I sat there staring at her and thinking, she doesn't even want to stay awake with me. And immediately another voice inside me answered, or maybe she's exhausted because she drove 4 hours to see you. The war inside my head became constant near the end of our relationship. Nothing felt emotionally clean anymore. The next morning she casually mentioned a trip she planned to take with friends in the spring. Then she added, I probably won't be on my phone much. I really need a mental reset. Something inside me dropped. I smiled, nodded, pretended to be supportive, but internally, I spiraled for days. I kept thinking, when I love someone, I want to share things with them. Why doesn't she? I obsessed over that question so much that I stopped asking a more important one. Why did I need her communication style to mirror mine in order to feel secure? That question came later, much later. At the time, all I knew was that I felt emotionally hungry all the time. And hungry people become irrational around crumbs. The worst part is that she really did try, in her own way. After difficult conversations, she would make visible efforts, longer phone calls, random affectionate texts, photos during her day. For a few days, I would relax. Then slowly the old pattern returned, and with it, my anxiety. I think we both started feeling monitored in different ways. She felt emotionally chased. I felt emotionally abandoned. Neither description was completely fair. Both were partially true. There is a particular sadness in loving someone who is not wrong for being themselves. If she had been cruel, leaving would have felt cleaner. If I had been completely unreasonable, changing would have felt simpler. But real relationships are rarely that neat. Sometimes two decent people slowly exhaust each other trying to bridge emotional differences neither fully understands. The final crack happened quietly, not during a fight, not during some dramatic betrayal. I had sent her a long message one evening after a difficult week. Nothing manipulative. Just honest. I told her I missed her, that I sometimes struggled with the distance, that hearing from her more often made me feel connected. Hours passed. Then the next morning she replied with only this: "I don't know how to love you without feeling like I'm failing." I read it over and over, and suddenly my heartbreak became mixed with guilt, because I had spent so much time focusing on my own loneliness that I had stopped noticing hers. She felt inadequate around me, pressured, measured constantly against emotional standards that came naturally to me but not to her. I wasn't trying to hurt her, but impact matters more than intention sometimes. For the first time, I stopped asking whether she loved me enough. Instead, I asked whether we were making each other feel safe. The answer frightened me. A month later, we ended things over a video call that lasted less than 30 minutes. No screaming, no cruelty, just two tired people trying not to cry too loudly into their microphones. Afterward, I walked around my apartment touching objects that still carried traces of her. A sweater on the chair, her tea in the kitchen cabinet, a hair tie beside my bed. I missed her terribly. I still do sometimes, but the strangest part is that I also felt relief, and admitting that made me feel disloyal for a long time. Relief that I no longer had to decode silence every day. Relief that she no longer had to perform emotional intensity she couldn't naturally sustain. For months I kept wanting to message her anyway. Random things, songs, photos, tiny moments. Sometimes I even typed them out, then deleted them, not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally understood that love alone does not automatically create emotional compatibility. That realization hurt my pride more than the breakup itself. I had always believed enough love could overcome almost anything: distance, stress, differences. Now I think love can survive many things, but only when both people can still breathe inside it. And we couldn't anymore. I don't think either of us failed completely. I think we simply kept trying to receive love in forms the other person struggled to naturally give. There is grief in that, but there is also something strangely tender about it now when I look back. Two people reaching for each other across distance, missing slightly, trying anyway.